All right, folks, ladies and gentlemen, I am super excited to welcome you to our brand new class entitled Worrier to Warrior. This course is all about feeling good and transforming negative emotions to positive emotions. And the course is going to use classic Jewish wisdom, especially founded upon the principles of Jewish mystical and spiritual wisdom, coupled with modern psychology and emerging wellness wisdom, if you will, coupled together to provide us tools for feeling better in life. So I want to begin by saying, good to see you. I want to begin by saying like this. What we've been told about happiness is a lie. What we've been told about happiness is that if you have the right job, if you have the right career, if you drive this car, if you have that house, if you live in that neighborhood, right? If you go on that vacation, if you hang out with those people, if you have that bag that matches that pair of shoes with that haircut, and if you post everything on Instagram with just the right filter, then you'll be happy. But here's the thing, that's a lie, and it's always been a lie. Because it never makes us happy. And the goalposts keep on moving. And so when we buy all that stuff, or we get all that stuff, and we ask ourselves, are we really happy inside? And we answer to ourselves, because we can't answer this to anybody else. But to ourselves, the answer is, well, not really. Well, then Madison Avenue comes back at us and says, well, it's because you don't have the latest thing or the other thing. And again, the goalposts keep on moving. And as they move, we move, and we keep on chasing and chasing. But it's a chase of futility, because that magical happiness place born of the stuff, that's never there. That's never a reality. So the truth is, and this is something that Judaism teaches again and again and again, that happiness is not something that comes from outside of ourselves. It's not something that's the product of something that happens to us or something that we might acquire. Again, something external that we might acquire. Rather, happiness is the product of a decision and a choice and a mindset and an attitude and an approach that we take. Happiness is in our hands. It's in our control. And that's the premise of this course. This course is going to, again, it's based on the premise we have control over our happiness. Point number one. Point number two, there are tools that we can learn and tools that we can gain in order to be a little bit happier, a little bit more happy. That metronome thing, we have a beat to the class.
I think it's the sound.
It's the sound system. It's a little bit glitchy. If it's really disturbing us, it is really disturbing? Okay. I think, listen, it usually goes away, but I'm happy to see what we can do to get rid of it. The point is that happiness, you see, happiness, I'm sensing unhappiness coming from the sound. And the premise of today's class is, help me out, what's the premise? The premise is that we control our own happiness. And as we control our own happiness, we can make a choice that is pleasure, that despite the annoying sounds that might be present, and despite all the other stuff that goes on in our lives or around us, that we can choose to be happy. This is the key to this course. Now, throughout this course, we're going to be looking at various negative feelings, various negative emotions, and combating them one at a time. So I'm going to put up here, today's lesson is Achieving Authenticity, Addressing Impostor Syndrome. We're going to get to that later in the lesson. But just so you know, of course, overview, this is what's upcoming over the next 6 sessions, over the next 7 weeks, because we're off the week of Thanksgiving. So, number 1 today, again, imposter syndrome. Lesson 2, next week we'll focus on shame and inadequacy. These are massive catalysts of negative feelings inside, negative emotions, shame and inadequacy. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with guilt and remorse. You think Jewish guilt is a celebrated thing? Not so much, right? Guilt is fine. Guilt, not so fine. We have to make sure to distinguish between the two. So guilt and remorse. Emotion number 4, hardship and tragedy. How to deal with, how to stay positive despite the stuff that happens in life that's not so positive. Emotion 5 is happiness and positive emotions. In other words, once we deal with getting rid of some of the negative emotions, how do we bring in more happiness into our lives? And finally, The sixth lesson will focus on relationships, how to find happiness, how to find positivity in relationships, and often the closer the relationship is, oftentimes, the more difficult the relationship is. That's usually how it works. The closer it is, the more challenging it oftentimes is, and we're going to have a lesson dedicated to how to remain and how to build positivity in our closest relationships. Perhaps we might retitle that last session "How to Like the People You Love," because that's a big thing. That's an important thing. I love you, but let's like each other. Let's like each other as well. Okay, good. So again, as a basic summary of the course objective, very simply stated, this course is all about learning how to live a more positive feeling life through the wisdom of Torah, i.e. Jewish wisdom, as well as other wisdoms that have emerged in the field of medicine, psychology, mental health, etc. Okay, before we jump in, I need to clarify a point that I mentioned before, but I want to really drive it home. And the point is like this: there's no magic wand in life that makes everything better on the outside. There's no magic wand that anyone could wave. I can't wave the one, and you can't wave the one to make sure that everything that happens in your life is happy. That there's no challenges that will come your way, that the car won't get a flat tire, that the person won't cut you off on the highway, that another person won't get upset with you and you didn't think you did anything wrong. There's nothing that anyone can do to prevent what we might call negative things happening to us. But again, the core premise of this course is that we control our perceptions and reactions. No matter what happens around us, we have the ability to remain in control and to choose our own happiness. Let's begin with text number 1. I love this text. This is an excerpt from a longer letter. Hey, good to see you. That the Rabbi wrote to someone who was going through difficulty. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe here in this letter is trying to reframe the conversation, to reframe this person's perspective on life. Okay, so let's begin with text number 1. Once again, page number 3. Let's make sure everybody has a copy. Share it. Yeah. Book or a copy? Which one are you going for?
Book.
Book. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Jennifer, yeah. Question?
Reading?
No, let's start. Will you start? Awesome. Please. Just text 1, page number 3. Here is the Rebbe's perspective on dealing with life's challenges.
In our world, everything is a mixture of good and bad. Human beings must choose which aspects they will emphasize, contemplate, and pursue. For in each person's life, there are 2 possible approaches. To see the good that surrounds us, or the opposite. It is instructive that our sages tell us that Adam was an ingrate. Even before he was banished from the Garden of Eden, where he lived in a literal paradise, he complained about his circumstances. Conversely, there were Jewish men and women who thanked and blessed the Creator and recited the morning blessings while living through the most horrifying times in the German concentration camps. Ultimately, each individual's circumstances will lie somewhere between his 2 extremes. Needless to say, my intention is not to imply that anyone deserves suffering, God forbid. My point is simply to underscore the reality. The type of lives that we live, whether full of satisfaction and meaning or the opposite, depends in large measure on our choice, which dictates whether we will focus on the positive or on the negative.
Thank you. So let's reflect on this reading for a minute, because I think, like I said before, I think it's so powerful. Somebody tell me in their own words, what is the Rebbe saying in this letter? What's the core message? Yeah.
Okay, where is your laser focus? What are you putting your attention on? What are you in love with? am I in love with the fact that this person dissed me at work? And am I now going to obsess about this?
Okay, good, good. What else? What else did you get? Anybody?
Maybe in even the best of circumstances, you could make it unhappy for yourself.
Yeah. Right? You can have an objectively, well, again, there's who's measuring objective. I love the example of Adam. Let's talk about Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are in literal paradise. They're in Gan Eden. And what happens? Famously, right? They eat of the forbidden fruit. And God turns to Adam and he says to Adam, "No, why'd you eat? Like, what happened here? I told you not to eat from it. How could you?" And so what is Adam's response?
Blame Eve.
Adam says, not just she made me do it, worse than that. He says like this to God. He says, "The woman that you gave to me, she made me do it." In other words, instead of thanking his lucky stars that God created Eve so that he could have a wife, etc., right? Instead of being grateful for that, he says, yeah, it's her fault, but it's not only her fault, it's your fault. Right? It's the woman that you made. Basically, Adam is saying like this. Something happened wrong here, right? The fruit was eaten, shouldn't have been eaten. But I'll tell you this, says Adam, it definitely wasn't my fault. It was everyone else's fault. It's God's fault. He says, God, it's your fault. You made Eve. It's Eve's fault. She told me to do it. Everyone else's fault, but not my fault. So first of all, this is a lesson, or this is a cautionary tale about not accepting responsibility and passing the buck, right? Everyone else did something wrong here except for Adam in Adam's worldview and Adam's mind at this moment. But it's also a classic representation of what happens when a person doesn't feel gratitude. In this case, he should be the most thankful and grateful and humble and just awestruck person in the world. I mean, there weren't that many people in the world. Okay, fine. But he should be all of those emotions, and he would automatically be the most in the world, because whatever. Or at least okay. However, instead of that, he's an ingrate. He says, I didn't even need it. It's terrible. It's the worst thing that ever happened. So again, you can take something, like you said, you can take something that's amazing and perceive it as something. You can have the greatest blessing and perceive it as a curse. And conversely, the Rebbe says, using the other extreme, obvious extreme, the Holocaust, concentration camps, and he said there were many Jewish men and women who every single day said the morning blessings. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who gave me my health, who gave me my vision, who gives me the strength to stand up and walk every morning, to wear shoes, etc. These were people who were living in living hell, in absolute hell, in the worst human possible that we can ever conceive, the worst type of environment, and yet they were able to, as Jennifer said, they were able to focus on what they did have and be grateful for what they did have. And the Rebbe says at the end of that middle paragraph, I love how this is phrased. Ultimately, each individual circumstances will lie somewhere between these two extremes. I don't think anyone here is living in literal Gan Eden paradise, nor are we living, thank God, in a concentration camp, God forbid. So we're in the middle. We have some good things that are happening to us, some not good things, some blessings, some things that we see as not such a blessing. But ultimately, our happiness, our inner state of being, are we in general, wake up in the morning, are we feeling good? Or are we feeling not good? I don't mean like pain level. I mean emotionally. Are we feeling good or not feeling good? That's our choice. We make that choice. We make that choice every single day, and that's the product of how we see things. And so that's what this course is about. This course is about us embracing the choice that we have to either be negative or positive. It's a choice that we make. It's not objective, it's a choice. So number one, know it's a choice. Embrace the responsibility that comes with that. If it's a choice, I know I have a responsibility. Right? And if I, as Somebody there now?
Yeah.
There's, thank you. And if I have a choice, let me learn the tools to perhaps choose wisely. Choose, in this case, choose positively. That's what this course is all about. So we've been talking a lot about negative emotions and in general, negative emotions, feeling negatively, or positive emotions, feeling positive. So let's define negative and positive for a moment. Let's do text number 2. But before we do text number 2, I have a question that I want to ask. It's not going to be answered by text 2. Maybe it will, a little bit. But my question is, we talk about how it's a choice, how we feel, negative or positive feelings, negative feelings. So my question is going to be, what's so bad, theoretically, what's so bad if I have negative emotions, if I'm feeling negative? What's so terrible? We're not answering this yet. Hold the question, and let's give now some examples of both negative and positive emotions. Mike, please read text, if you will, please read text number 2 from a book of psychology regarding negative and positive emotions.
Negative emotions such as fear, sadness, shame, anger, contempt, guilt, disgust, anxiety, disappointment, embarrassment, loneliness, envy, and hatred share the property of involving an appraisal that something is wrong. One's well-being is threatened. One's goals have to be abandoned. One lacks what one desires. One views oneself as wrong or is not projecting the desired appearance to others, and so on. In contrast, positive emotions, happiness, gratitude, pride, love, relief, hope, and so on, involve appraisals that one is meeting one's goals, that a bad event has not come to pass, that one is meeting or exceeding one's own standards, that one's relationship with another is secure, and so on.
Thank you. So how are we defining now? We have a list, a small list, a starter list, if you will, of negative emotions, and a starter list of positive emotions. We have fear, sadness, shame, anger, contempt, guilt, disgust, anxiety, disappointment, embarrassment, loneliness, envy, hatred. That's quite a list. It's a decent list. I'm sure we can add to it and double it. I have no doubt that we can. But that's a good starter list. We have positive emotions, which are far fewer, as listed in this text. It's got to be a sign somewhere, right? Positive emotions, happiness, gratitude, pride, love, relief, hope, and so on. I love that, and so on. Okay, so we have positive emotions, negative emotions, and the way it's described here is, what are negative emotions, or where do they come from? They come from a sense that something's wrong. Something's bad. Something's no good. And that stirs negative emotions. And positive emotions, conversely, things are good. I'm happy with things. Things are good. So, let's get back to my question. My question was, what's so bad if I have negative emotions? Maybe I should embrace it. Maybe it's fine.
Okay, so involve appraisals that one is not meeting one's goals. One's goals have to be abandoned.
Yeah.
One lacks what one desires. One views oneself as wrong.
Yes. You're saying that's not good.
Yeah, it's very, very, very. It's a gestalt of not good. It's a whole world of not good. It's not that something is wrong, like you got a parking ticket. It's a gestalt.
Saying everything. It's a whole. Okay, good. Good.
And one's personal goals and fiber of your being have to be abandoned.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Have to be abandoned.
Good. I like that. Good. Yes.
I think to follow that, it's a signal that perhaps your values have to shift, because that's what causes the problem, the values. And if you move your values, you move the problem, and probably increase your quality of life.
Good. I like that. Excellent. Yeah.
I have a question, because if you look at the negative emotions, I mean, some of them we can, I would assume, or directly say they're not, they're not good, contempt, guilt, disgust. But something like sadness, loneliness, and disappointment, I mean, sometimes,
They'll seem pretty natural, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So how,
And maybe it's indicative of feeling.
right.
If something happened and we didn't feel sad, we might question our own humanity. How could we go through that experience and not feel sad? I mean, is that negative? So I think it's an excellent question. And it really leads, and all the other points are also good, and I want to take some feedback here as well, and I'll get there in a second. But I think your question and the other points are going to lead us to where I want to go with this, which is maybe an expanded definition, not necessarily larger, but a bit of a different definition of what is a negative emotion and what do we mean when we say it's negative, right? Because negative can sound like a judgment, like it's bad. And then it's like, well, why can't I feel sad if something sad happened? It doesn't. So we're going to see that negative is not necessarily a judgment of bad, but it's more, but it means something else, which we'll get to in a second. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that there's a time element in there too, because if a negative emotion, if you're in a tunnel and you can't see that there's an end to the tunnel,
Right.
then that can be harmful. But sometimes having a negative emotion, as long as it's temporary and you feel that and you know that it's going to be temporary and that you can change it, can be helpful.
Yeah. Reminds me of the famous joke about New York. You know this one? Why are New Yorkers always depressed? Because the light at the end of the tunnel is Jersey.
New Jersey.
I apologize, New Jersey. I apologize for anybody who's from New Jersey. It's not my joke, and it's not, I know I told it, but it's no mean to disrespect. Yeah.
Just something that I noticed from the text was that all of these contributing, why one might feel good or why one might feel bad, they're all centered on the self,
Mm-hmm.
and they're also all centered on external things happening to the self. So, which in essence makes it sort of self-centered, and it also makes you reactionary to events that happen to you, which sometimes you can control, but a lot of times you can't. Which just strikes me in the moment as kind of a helpless or hopeless way to live, because if your emotions are being guided by what happens to you and you don't have control over what happens to you, then you're just a victim of life circumstances.
Yeah. So I like both points. Excellent. So it's ego driven. There's ego involved, and it's also what's happening to me or to my ego. Yeah.
I heard recently or learned that different emotions have different frequencies. Like if you're happier, it's a higher frequency. If you're sadder, and you can feel that and pick up on it. And like everything in the universe is already created and available. So if you are at a higher frequency, you'll get what you give, and it'll match you. And that's, so I guess, like, why would you have all bad emotions or like negative? Because like you would just continue in that cycle.
You're kind of stuck in that way of tuning in. That's excellent. If only we came with like a little tuner button, a little tuner knob, right? Oh, let's get some higher frequencies, like that metronome.
Yeah.
Let's get some like higher frequency where we can't even hear it to get us all tweaked up. So I want to share with you all amazing points. I want to share with you what it says in the book of Tanya. Now, Tanya, I have to introduce Tanya briefly because we have a video that's going to explain what this book is. It's a book of spiritual wisdom that was authored by the founder of the Chabad movement. It was authored in the year 1796. And the book of Tanya is a book of spiritual guidance. It's about how to live an optimized life, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, and there are many chapters, there are 53 total chapters in this book, and the middle section, chapters, I want to say like 26, 27 through like 36, there's like in the middle of the book, the author deals extensively with negative emotions. But he says one amazing thing when setting up the discussion. He says, you know what's wrong? You know what the problem with negative emotions are? It sucks the energy out of us and stops us and holds us back from living a full life. He says that's the core problem. In other words, a negative emotion, it's not our business to say good or bad. It's not. No one's judging anyone else. It's called negative in this context because it drains our energy. And to live life, we know this. To live life and to accomplish and to stand up for what's right and to make good decisions, to make any decisions and not just go with the flow, right? You need energy in life. You can't have energy when there's negativity inside. You know how it feels when you're anxious about something? Or when you're sad about something, and you feel like you can't even move? You feel like you're stuck? That's not the optimal way to live. That's the point. He uses such a beautiful example. He uses the example of athletics, specifically wrestling. But not like modern, scripted wrestling, but like where the outcome is already predetermined by Vince McMahon. No, what he's talking about here is it's two combatants, two people that are actually physically wrestling each other. And he says, and we're going to read this in text 3 in a moment, he says oftentimes what determines victory, or the opposite, is not necessarily who's stronger, but it's who has the most energy at this moment. And what determines who has the most energy? It's not physical strength again. It's emotional, psychological. It's what's going on the inside. How do you feel? One of the ways that I like to illustrate this is if you've ever watched a sporting event, football or baseball, the World Series just finished now, hockey, I'm from Pittsburgh, so I'm a hockey guy. South Africa just won, rugby, and mazel tov to all the South Africans, and right, and soccer, whatever it is, or whatever sport it is, you have this notion, or you have this phenomenon, which is really, really incredible, where one team, let's say a team sport, one team is dominating the other team, and then suddenly something happens, even something small, and there's a shift in the fill in the blank, in the what shifts? What do we call it? Momentum. There's a momentum shift. And suddenly, the next thing you know, it goes the other way completely. And the question is, what happened? What exactly happened? What happened? Momentum shift. Well, what does it mean? What is it, like magic, fairy dust? Like, what actually happened? I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened is one team was doing well, and they were excited, and they were feeling good, and their heart was open in the sense, not like they were hugging the other person across the line. It means, but they were emotionally connected and positive, and therefore all their energy was flowing in a positive way. And then what happened? Some small thing, even a small thing happened, and they became anxious, nervous about something. They tightened up a little bit. And the next thing, and the same confidence that they had shifted, because it's a zero-sum game, only one can win. So it now shifts to the other side, and now they're operating in an optimal way. The same thing is true in life, because sports is life. I'm kidding. No, but the same thing is true in life, right? What's true in athletics is true in life. When we are feeling positive, then we are living an optimized life. Our potential, our strengths, talents, abilities can come out in the most magical ways when we're feeling emotionally good and positive. When we're feeling emotionally negative, even if it's for a good reason, right? But if we're feeling negative, we're not optimizing, we're not living an optimized life in the sense of accomplishing everything that we can accomplish. Let's read this inside. We have 3 texts, text 3a, text 3b, and text 3c. 3a is talking about wrestling, 3b brings it back to the human being, and 3c finishes it off. Rose, please read these.
When attempting to be victorious over a physical opponent, such as in the case of 2 individuals who are wrestling with each other, each one striving to fell the other, one who is lazy and sluggish will be easily defeated and will fall, even if that individual is stronger than the other. It is exactly so in the struggle against one's negative impulses.
Please continue, 3b.
It is exactly so in the struggle against one's negative impulses. It is impossible to conquer them with laziness and sluggishness, which originate in negative emotions and in a heart that is numb like a stone.
So before you continue, I want to point out one thing. He says, look, life is a battle. It's an inner battle. Every day we have to fight against ourselves, against this inner inertia, this inner gravity, gravitational pull that says, well, maybe not, or maybe you should, or maybe you can't. Maybe you can't do it. Maybe you can't be amazing. Maybe you can't succeed and accomplish. Maybe you don't belong there. Maybe you don't deserve it. Whatever these negative feelings, and you have to push against it. You have to push hard, and you can't push hard if you're having, well, it's kind of like a circular thing, but When you're feeling the negativity, it's hard to push against the negativity. So he says any negative impulse, any negative sensation inside cannot be conquered if we're filled or inundated with that negativity. So let's continue with 3C, which is now the solution, if you will.
Rather, conquering one's negative impulses requires alacrity, which derives from positive emotion and from a heart that is free and cleansed from any trace of worry and negative emotion whatsoever.
Thank you. And I love that last line where he says that living this optimized life of living the life of a warrior, right? This is warrior. I know it almost sounds the same, but I'm referring to the positive one, right? Warrior to warrior. So to live like a warrior, to live like someone who's not afraid, who's conquering, means that you don't have any trace of worry and negative emotion whatsoever in your heart. I want to give you another sports example. Sorry for the multiple sports examples, but I feel like this is a good way to illustrate it. So imagine you are a kicker on a football team, right? The one who kicks the ball. So you have all these. Usually the kicker is the smallest person on the field, right? They're usually, everyone else is like massive, and the kicker is a kicker. Okay. Like I could almost be a kicker. I can't, but I could almost, but I can't. Anyway, so what's going on? Imagine that the game is tied. 3 seconds left, and they call out the kicker. Literally, the kicker's job is to make this kick, and it's a makeable kick. The kicker comes out and misses the kick. So imagine it's you. How do you feel?
Pressure.
Huh?
Pressure.
No, you missed it. You missed it. Your team could have won. And they've been in the trenches, right? We know what's going on with football now, right? We're not advocating playing football and with brain stuff, but you know what's going on, right? Everyone's pounding each other for the last 3 hours. You've been like staying warm, staying loose, flexing the leg, almost like Radio City Music Hall, or something, right? You've been staying loose and limber, and you have one job, and you miss it. How do you feel? Come on, how do you really feel? Let him down, you feel ashamed, you feel terrible, you feel horrible, you feel like a failure. Guilty. And trust me, the fans, they're booing you maybe, right? It's terrible. It's not a good feeling. All right, but the good news is you didn't lose, it was tied. I said up you were tied. So now you go to overtime. So now you're in overtime. And guess what? Scenario plays out again, and you have another chance to win the game. You're the kicker again. You trot back out on the field. What's the worst thing you can think about right now? Right? You know what the worst thing you can be in? The worst place in your head and in your heart is to think about the last kick that you missed and to feel guilty or ashamed about that kick. You know why? Because you're more likely to miss it if you're feeling all that stuff. Your best likelihood to make the kick is a heart that is free and cleansed from any trace of worry and negative emotion whatsoever. Quoting the author of Tanya. The end of text 3C. Your best shot at making that kick is to, and I don't, how we do this is the purpose of this course, right? That's why we're here for 6 weeks, right? How we do this is the purpose of this course. But what we're meant to do in that moment is, what happened doesn't exist. At this point, I'm focused on what I need to do. I'm confident. Get rid of the negative, infuse the positive. I feel confident. I can make this. I've made this 1,000 times. I will make this. You envision it, whatever it is. You get your mechanics down, and you make the kick. Negative emotions drain us of our ability to live the good life. When I say the good life, I mean our best life. Whatever that is for me and you. Everyone's living a different life. But our best life is lived not from a state of feeling the negative stuff inside. When I say negative, again, it's not a judgment. It's the stuff that sucks our energy. So, one more way to visualize it. I think it's good to have visualizations. So imagine 2 vehicles. Imagine there's a drag race down Peachtree. I'm not advocating this. But imagine 2 cars drag racing down Peachtree. A Ferrari in one lane, and a Pinto in the other lane. Remember a Pinto? Remember the Pintos? A Ferrari. I'm barely old enough to remember a Pinto. I remember it like, yeah, what? Huh?
How do you even?
How do I know?
Yeah.
What year was the Pinto around?
1980s.
Yeah. Was it 80s? 70s? So I remember then the aftermath of the Pinto, really. I grew up in the 80s. All right, so here's the deal. Imagine you have a Ferrari and a Pinto. So who's going to win the race? Come on, guys. Not necessarily. Come on. I set you guys up. Always be ready for the setup. Why? If the Ferrari is out of gas, if there's no fuel in the vehicle, in the Ferrari, it's not going anywhere. And that Pinto may explode. But that's what happened with the Pinto, right? God forbid it should never explode. But if there's no fuel in the Ferrari, it ain't going anywhere. And it's the same thing in our lives. To live life, we have to have fuel. I'm not telling anything you don't know. Hopefully, though, we're highlighting things and bringing out truths to the surface that we can then begin working on. It's like holding up a magnifying glass or a microscope so that we can begin doing the work that we need to work on. And again, what I want to highlight here is, in life, you need to have energy. Without energy, what's life? It's existence. It's not life. There's a difference. Existence means you happen to not be here. You with me? Yeah? You happen to not be here. I think I said that accurately. Whatever. You're here because you're here, because you're not here. But living means that you're here. You're here, you're active, you're vitalized, you feel something, you're energized, you're taking steps, risks, whatever it is, you're making the kicks. Why? Because you feel positive inside. The negative stuff is draining. So it's really not about, this course is not about, well, negative emotions don't feel good, so let's get rid of bad feelings and let's replace it with good feelings. That's part of it, but that's not really what's at stake here. What's at stake here is, it's an existential question. It's, are we living or are we not living? Right? Are we living or just merely existing? That's our question. Living means energy. You need fuel, and fuel means positivity and not negativity.
I was thinking of David and Goliath.
Yes.
That David had
He was a good shot.
Well, he was a good shot, but he was faced with this giant, with all this negativity coming toward him, but he had confidence.
He had the confidence.
Or like they say in the song, high hopes.
High hopes. You're right. You're 100% right. Everyone else was afraid. They were scared. No one wanted to shout. Goliath was mocking and embarrassing the Jewish people for a long time. And then David steps up. You're right, with that confidence. And the confidence didn't come from fear. Didn't come from fear. By the way, this doesn't mean that we can't accomplish even great things when we're afraid. Of course we can. But we're talking about choosing a way to be. And we need to choose, right? We don't need to work a workaround to maybe still be effective even when we're, right? We want to come at this in a proactive way. Coming at it in a proactive way means that we choose to be happy. And please read text 4. I love this. This is a Hasidic saying that goes back to Rabbi Aaron of Karlin.
There is no biblical commandment mandating that we be joyful. Likewise, negative emotion is not prescribed by any biblical prohibition. But joy accomplishes what no mitzvah can accomplish, and negative emotion causes greater damage than any sin. Basically,
the translation or that text is a little bit wordy and just a drop wordy. If I were to summarize it, the Hasidic saying is like this. You look in the Bible, it doesn't say, God said, do not be sad. God said, you have to be happy. It doesn't say that. But the Hasidic saying goes, what sadness the danger of sadness, it's worse than any sin. And the upside of happiness is, it's greater than any mitzvah. Why? Based on what we've described up until now, we understand. Because sadness, it's not just sadness, it's negative emotions, all negative emotions. They may not be a sin, but they're more devastating than sin in the sense that it holds back us from living, from doing what we need to accomplish. We're here for a purpose. We're here for a mission. And if we're feeling negative inside, then we're not living. And that's even perhaps worse than any sin. And on the positive side, having positive emotion, although it's not a mitzvah, doesn't say There's no mitzvah that says, don't worry, be happy. That was a bumper sticker. Right? A good bumper sticker. And according to the Hasidic saying, it's maybe even more important than a mitzvah, and the opposite. Right? Because when we're positive, we're motivated, and we can accomplish, and we can stand up to the challenges that we face because we have the energy, because we have the fuel. So we got to fuel up with positivity.
Isn't it a mitzvah to bring joy to a bride and groom on the wedding day?
Yeah,
That
is
is
it one of the
commanded.
613 though? That's the question.
Commanded, to bring joy.
I don't. A lot of things we call a mitzvah, kind of loosely. Like we say it's a mitzvah, but is it listed in one of the 613? Like, is there a verse in Torah that talks about when a wedding is going on, make sure to make the bride and groom, or is it derived from something else? The point is like this. You're right. There is a specific. We are told that when there's a simcha, like a wedding, to bring extra, right? And we do call it a mitzvah, but I think the point here still stands, and that is that even if it's not officially counted as one of the mitzvahs or one of the opposite of mitzvot, it's still it's critical, and it might be even more critical because you can't really do anything else when you're in that state of especially if it's a severe state of negative emotion. It's debilitating. Right? We all know what that feels like. It's all happened to us at one point or another, where you feel like all your energy is sapped. And it's not a physical thing. It's not a physical thing. It's an emotional thing. And we're looking to get out of that. So I'll take the questions in just 1 second. I just want to conceptually just connect one more dot, and that is, or not even a dot, but just therefore, this course is all about learning, understanding what's at stake, which is living. So since that's what's at stake, this course is all about learning how to slide away the negative emotions, which could drain our energy, and introduce more positivity in our lives. And we're going to be looking at, like I mentioned before, all these different areas, and every area is going to have its own way, its own little technique about how to do it. Although I will say that there's a general perspective that we're going to learn about life, but really about ourselves and what's going on inside of ourselves. That's going to help us, in each case, choose a more positive feeling over a more negative feeling. And that's really what we're going to do. We're going to present a powerful outlook on life, on our own lives, that's going to change everything. Zahava, and then...
Actually, it's not a mitzvah, but God actually gives us the context, because he says to serve him the simcha.
Yes.
With joy.
Yes.
So doing a mitzvah, I have to do it and blah, 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 it's like you didn't do it.
Yeah.
So the simcha, and we're here on earth to serve Hashem.
Right.
Happiness.
So
it's not happiness, the simcha is joy.
Joy.
So happiness is actually, to me, it's like the clouds floating by in the sky. I'm not chasing happiness. It's having joy in my life. It's the context from which you perform everything.
Yeah, beautiful. I will tell you that although I think you precluded this in what you said, I want to make an important distinction, and that is there is a verse in Psalms. King David writes, "Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha," serve God with joy. But that's typically understood in the context of a mitzvah, like you said. When you do a mitzvah, don't do it begrudgingly, do it joyously. This is a little bit different. Although it's also could be understood in the same, but it's a little bit different. This is not when you're serving God, when you're doing a mitzvah, make sure you're happy. This is living life in a happy way. And now, the whole life we're meant to be serving God also, okay, I understand that, but this is not just in the context of doing a mitzvah to be happy. This is the context of waking up in the morning and going to bed at night and carpool, picking up the kids and shopping and sitting in Atlanta traffic and everything besimcha, with a state of inner joy. And that's so powerful. And
I think I'll save my question till the end of the course.
Okay.
I bet you're going to get to my question. You always answer.
Possibly. I can't guarantee it, but you know what? It's a good challenge. Challenge accepted. If this was like David Copperfield, write down your question. And then I'll appear at the back of the room magically. No, and then, yeah.
Are we using happiness and joyful interchangeably?
I'm not making a distinction right now for this. I think the language that I'm probably going to use most often is related to feelings and emotions, and that's going to be negative and positive emotions. Right? It's about how to, I don't know if we're ever going to banish negative emotions forever. I don't think that's realistic. But it's how to push away some of the negative feelings and bring in more of the positive feelings. That's what we're doing. That's the purpose of this course. Understanding that our lives are at stake. I don't mean to I don't want to sensationalize it, but really living, that's what it is. Okay. So to get into this, I mentioned a moment ago that we're going to learn something, a core truth about who we are inside that's going to radically help us live a life with more positive emotions than negative emotions. And that's also found in the book of Tanya, this wisdom. And I'm just going to go through some slides. I'm not big on the slides, so we're just going to go through them very quickly. And I won't even mention them. I'm just going to slide through them. Okay, all right. Yep. Done that. Yep. Been there. Absolutely. Okay, here we go. Oh, hold on 1 second. Let me get the volume back up.
The followers of Chabad Lubavitch refer to the book of Tanya as the Bible of Hasidism. It has spawned several thousand editions, was published in myriad locations across the globe, and it is studied daily by thousands of Jews, in private, in classes, online.
This is what the page should look like.
And through apps. Its author, Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi, was an 18th century scholar and mystic of rare abilities. While our nation produced many great sages over the millennia, Rabbi Shner Zalman stands among the select few that tower over our people's history and power our progress to an inspired destiny. In 1775, he founded the Chabad Lubavitch Hasidic movement, and in 1796, he agreed to have his magnum opus, the Tanya, published for public benefit. For 20 years, Rabbi Shner Zalman painstakingly weighed each letter and word of his manuscript, and Jewry has spent the subsequent 200 years unpacking the gifts of guidance he invested within those sacred phrases. In the Tanya, one discovers a highly methodical presentation of the foundational principles of Hasidism: how to serve God sincerely, joyfully, how to remain humble, motivated, how to deal with inner struggles, the purpose of life, of challenge, of existence, of the individual. Insights flow with clarity, forming a cohesive river of wisdom that revolutionized Jewish thought. Surprisingly, the Tanya is not written in the style of a philosophical or theological thesis. Rather, it is framed as a response. Here is the work's purpose as expressed by its author in his foreword to the Tanya. I address those with whom I had frequent warm conversations, and who revealed to me all the secrets of their hearts and minds in all that regard to their heartfelt service of God. This work is comprised of responses to many questions frequently posed by Hasidim in our land, for they seek advice and moral guidance in the service of God, each according to their spiritual station. Time no longer permits me to reply to everyone individually and in detail. Besides, people forget the responses I give them in the course of conversation. I have therefore recorded all the replies to all the questions, to be preserved for perpetuity, and to be readily available to all. There is no longer any need for people to press to be admitted to talk with me in private, for in this work, everyone can find counsel to soothe their soul, and proper guidance on any matter that one finds difficult in the service of God. Rabbi Shner Zalman was overwhelmed. He had perfect answers to difficulties that had plagued sincere worshippers since the dawn of time. Who would not wish to meet him and receive life-changing guidance? But a day has only so many hours, while he had tens of thousands of followers who streamed to his door from across Eastern Europe. He therefore set his quill to paper in an effort to do what none had dared to do before: to collect answers to a lifetime of spiritual questions from people of all walks of life. This book would contain, in his words, all the responses to all the questions, and it would be formatted so that it was readily available to all, for all Jews, for all times. The Tanya contains solutions for each individual's struggles in their spiritual and emotional lives, for the Jews of his own times and for our struggles today.
Is that the original FAQ?
Yeah. You know, people say like they wish life came with an instruction manual.
Uh-huh.
We got one, and it's amazing. Tanya's amazing. Now you have to study it with someone who understands how to explain it, but it's incredible work. Yes.
It's pretty bold to say these are all the answers to all the questions.
Literally what he
I
says.
mean, when
Yes.
using that superlative all.
He's going bold.
That's bold.
Go bold or go home is what is.
There are going to be other questions that come up. Like you can find all the answers to all the questions. Like I know things can be applied to other things, but did he really mean that he thought he had covered it up? Like that there
With regards to our spiritual identity and the emotional challenges that come with that, absolutely. Now, with regards to, I don't know how to work the parking system out here that we just got up. We're not going to find that in Tanya. So it doesn't have all the answers to all the questions in life, including the new parking situation. But it does have all the stuff for our spiritual side. And if we can't find it, we have to keep on looking. But it's all in there. It's amazing. Sunday mornings, we don't do what we were doing Tanya. Yeah, Sunday mornings, Kabbalah and coffee, 9:30 a.m. Everyone's invited. We study Tanya and Tanya-inspired texts. Okay, but getting back here. So one of the major points of Tanya, and this is really so fundamental and revolutionary, is where he describes the human being as being a composite of two forces that are probably in our terminology most accurately described as operating systems. So imagine you have a computer, you have the hardware, and then you have what runs the computer, i.e. the operating system. Now, so let's, for the purpose of our conversation, let's define some operating systems. So what are some famous operating systems that people use on their computers? Help me out here. Windows. Good. What else? Linux. Good. What else? There's one more. Mac. Right. Mac OS. Right. That's the third. So we have three major operating systems. We have Windows, Mac, Linux. And that's the way it is. So if you have a machine, it's typically running one. I know you can run like parallel or parallax or whatever it is, and it can run like multiple operating systems on the same machine. But typically it's one operating system per machine. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya, he explains that the human being is one hardware, right? We have one set of hands, one set of eyes, one set of ears, etc. Right? We have one body, but inside of us are two operating systems, and this is different than the typical notion of a good inclination and a negative inclination, a Yetzer Tov, a Yetzer Hara, depicted in cartoons when I was a kid, at least in the 80s again, as the angel on the one shoulder and the red dude on the other shoulder, right, with the old pitchfork and the thing, right? So that's how it was depicted. And one says, "Ooh, do the right thing," and the other says, "Ooh, do the wrong thing." Not exactly. It's not just an inclination, it's an operating system. It's not just a program, it's an entire operating system. Two different operating systems. And understanding the two different operating systems helps us understand what is the core struggle and tension of life itself inside of us. And it's radically different than good versus bad. Take a look, just to clarify, take a look at page 12 and look at exercise 1.4. And look what it says. Complete the following sentence. We're going to do this together. For most people, the primary struggle in life is between, many would say good and evil, right and wrong. Maybe some people would say the primary struggle in life is between 9 and 5. Maybe you would say that. However, in Tanya, he absolutely revolutionizes and changes the conversation. And it's based on understanding these two operating systems. So without further ado, let's jump into this discussion. Text 6a. Dan, I think we're up to you. Okay. Page 13.
Rabbi Chaim Vital writes in Sha'arei HaKadusha that each of us, whether righteous or wicked, has two souls, two distinct life forces. As it is written, quote, "I have created souls." One life force originates in unholiness, All negative character traits stem from this life force.
So here we have a verse from, where is it, Isaiah? Yep, Isaiah says, Nishamot ani asiti. God says, I've created souls. And it doesn't mean souls amongst everybody, but even within one human being, we have multiple souls. Again, souls here is the equivalent of what I said before as an operating system. And one comes from the realm of unholiness, and that is the source of all negative character traits. But continue with text 6b, because this changes everything.
This life force is also the source of good character traits, such as mercy and benevolence.
So in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, this is the first chapter. This is chapter 1, where he's just laying out the landscape of the human being. He says, look, each of us has an operating system inside that's coming from not the holiest place, and it drives us toward negativity, but it also drives positivity. What? Let's continue text 6c, one more. And now we get a contrast, because here's the second operating system.
The second life force is a part of God above, literally.
So the first life force is from a lower state, if you will, and it drives us toward negativity as well as some positivity. The second life force is a part of God above, literally. So what is he saying? What does all this mean? I want to give it. Here's the explanation. The first soul or life force is the part of us that's focused on self. And the second life force is the part of us that's focused on mission or purpose, higher purpose and mission. So just to explain, in a very straightforward fashion, a person can do something negative based on ego. Ego says, I want, but someone else has it. But my ego says, I want it, so I'm going to take it. That's not nice. It's not nice. It's not nice to come up with a whole strategy about how to take something from someone else. It's not nice. But our ego says, I want it. And so we might. Has it ever happened that somebody took something that belonged to someone else in human history? Probably once or twice, right? Where's that coming from? It's coming from ego. I want it. You have it. I don't care. I still want it. Or I want to get ahead and you're in the way. I'm going to step over you or on you, right? I'm going to cut you out because I need to go forward. Or I need to get where I'm going in any sort of way, and therefore you're expendable, etc. So all of these negative behaviors are stemming from ego, but positivity can also stem from ego. I can do something good because it makes me feel good. So the first soul or operating system, again, without using spiritual terms, let's speak in very frank language. Part of us, we have a force inside that's all about self-preservation. And it's all about self. It's all about preserving self, taking care of self. Listen, we call ourselves number one, right? Got to take care of number one. Well, number one is kind of like the first number, but that's the ego. The ego says, I'm number one, right? And that is all, it's self-centric. And from that self-centric space within us comes negative behaviors as well as positive behaviors that are self-serving. And not in an evil way, but in a way of I'm doing it and it's helping someone else, but I'm doing it because it's making me feel good about myself. The second life force, this was text 6c, is the part of us that's focused on something higher than ourselves. So whether it's another human being or whether it's God, we can call it purpose or mission. It's all about something else. I want to describe to you two scenarios. Well, it's one scenario, two ways. You ever see a recipe? Like potato kugel, two ways? Okay, so this is like visiting your mother two ways. You ready? Let's go. So you haven't seen your mother in a while. No. So you haven't seen your mother in a while, and so you decide to visit. So you're visiting. You spend time, and it's a great visit. And then you walk out and you say, look at me, I'm such a good son or daughter, right? Such a good child. I visited, went well. You feel good about yourself. Does that mess up the visit? Does that make it a sin? Of course not. It's still a good visit. It still would be loosely called a mitzvah, right? Kibud av v'em, honoring our parents, still a mitzvah. When I say loosely, I mean, okay, forget loosely. It's a mitzvah, right? Still a mitzvah. But I'm feeling good. It's kind of taken on the flavor of me. Ego is getting in the way a little bit. Not getting in the way, but ego is very much present. The second modality, the second way is I visit. It's a great visit, and I walk out and I say, I'm so happy that I was able to bring a smile to my mother's face, that I made her day, that I was able to share that with her, able to share that hour or 2 hours, whatever, with her. And you think about her. In both cases, you visited, and in both cases, she was happy. But there's a difference. In the first case, it became somehow about you, which doesn't make it terrible or horrible or a bad thing, but it's about you. And the second case, it's about her. The first one is driven by the ego soul, which we would call the natural soul. It's the first life force that he mentions, which is driving not selfish behavior, but not even self-centered, that may be too harsh, but self-focused, good, self-focused. It's really self-centered, but we'll call it self-focused because it sounds better. Self-focused behavior. So it could be a good thing, but the focus is, the way you're framing it is about me, whereas the second life force, the second soul or second part of us, operating system, it's about purpose and mission. It's like, okay, so how am I of service? Like what is the need? How can I be of service to something greater than myself on a cosmic level or on a human level? Right? Who needs me today? My child, my spouse, my parent, my friend, my neighbor, my colleague, a stranger that I've never met. How can I be of service today? That's the second approach. And it's driven by two parts within us. Now, here's the crazy thing. The crazy thing is both are operating full blast at any given moment. It's not like either or. It's not like, when I say either or, what I mean is, it's not like, we only have one of these forces inside, at any given moment. Both are operating full force at any given time, which means at any given time, we have a choice of how we identify ourselves. Forget about what we're doing. How do we see ourselves? Consumers. When I say consumers, I mean beings that are seeking existence and more ways to feel good and to satisfy the need to exist. Existence is me putting up my flag and saying, I'm here. It's ego. Or am I looking for ways to give? Which I'll say is, again, getting back to existence and living, is really living. Living is giving. It's how am I giving? So am I at any given moment, it's really a definition of self. Am I a consumer? Or am I a giver? Am I a recipient, taking from life and feeding myself? I want to feel happy. I want to feel satisfied. I want to feel content. I want to feel safe. All these are good things, by the way. These are not bad things. Right? These are all good things. But they're all self things. Or in this moment, am I not thinking about myself at all? There's a wonderful text here. I think it's text 7. Oh, I love this. From Isaiah. Maya, please read text 7.
Those who are humble shall continuously rejoice in God.
So here Isaiah, he connects humble with simcha, with joy. And there's such a beautiful connection there. Because humble, people think of humble as like this, like meek and like scared. And that's not happy, that's not joyous. But that's not what humble is either. That's feeling low, that's feeling like a shmata, like a, how do you translate shmata? Like a rag, right? Like something that everyone steps on. That's not what humble is. Humble, I once heard a great definition. Humility or humbleness, let's just say humility, is not thinking less of yourself, but it's thinking of yourself less. And that's what we're talking about here. It's not like, I'm terrible, I'm the worst, I'm no good. That's not humble. That's a lie, because we're amazing. Each of us are amazing. So to tell ourselves that we're no good is just, it's not even accurate, number one. And that's not humility. That's just putting yourself down. Honestly, in the language of the great scholars, that's called lashon hara. You know what lashon hara is? Speaking ill of someone, and it doesn't have to be someone else. It could be yourself also. So self-deprecating it's not a virtue. It's not a virtue at all. And it's not humility. And it doesn't bring joy. True humility, which is, I'm not thinking about what I need right now. I'm thinking about the other person. You know how refreshing that is? We're going to have a class that this theme is a prominent theme, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But we'll have a session, one of the sessions, where we'll talk about how volunteering, giving up your time to help someone else out, is one of the greatest things that you can do to feel more joy in your life. Because for that moment, for those moments, you're not thinking about all the stuff that you don't have. You're not thinking about all the stuff that you need. You're not thinking about yourself. It's so refreshing to not think about yourself for a little bit. But anyway, let's get back. That's a longer discussion, and we'll have a full, maybe not a full class, but a class in part on that. But let's get back to this core idea. The core idea here is that whereas most people, when they think of the duality of the human condition, it's, well, good and bad. And Tanya says it's not good and bad. It's good and good. You visited your mother in both cases. It's not good and bad. That's too easy. It's self or mission. It's ego or purpose. That's the tension of life. In this moment, am I going to live a self-centric, self-centered, self-oriented life? Which is not bad, but it's about self. Or am I going to identify with the part of me that's not about me, that's about something greater than myself? And as we'll see, this is the core point, throughout the next 5 and a little bit sessions, we'll see how this, knowing this, number one, that we have 2 life forces inside, operating systems, number one. And number 2, that there's a part of us that's not self-centered, that's not self-centric, that's not self-oriented, that's not selfish, but rather altruistic and giving and purpose-oriented and mission-oriented. Knowing that can change everything. And I want to give one example right now. Impostor syndrome. So what is impostor syndrome? So,
Shark with the goldfish on me.
yes.
In the picture.
Yes, that one.
Fins.
I thought you were going baby shark on me. Boop, boop, boop. But, all right, so here's the deal. Shark, right, so imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, there's definitions here, text 8. We're not going to read it. We don't have time. You can read it on your own. What is imposter syndrome? In short, it means that you feel like a fraud. I would say, I'm not asking, this is not confession. We don't do that here. It's a wrong building for that. Look, I would venture to say that everyone in this room at some point in their life has felt inauthentic. I don't want to go like too bombastic, but like a fraud. I don't mean like a major federal offense fraud, but like fraud, inauthentic, an imposter. Someone's going to find out I don't belong here. I have a book here that describes this. I like this description. Just using a woman in business as an example. She arrives in her office, sees the fancy furniture in the corner view, and feels uncomfortable. She knows she worked hard to get here and that no one deserves a promotion more. But now I'm in over my head, she thinks. It's only a matter of time before they figure out I'm an imposter. You ever have that feeling? You don't have to answer. Okay, we all have that feeling. You could answer. You don't have to. We all have that feeling at some point where you feel like, uh-oh, I'm in over my head. Am I really qualified? Do I really know it? And they say, this is well documented in the last few decades. Many, many psychological studies have been working through this area of psychology. And they've found that people who are successful, very successful people, spend so much fuel, energy, listen to this, worrying about what are they going to do when they're found out to not be qualified. Are you with me on that? Not worried about getting busted, which is again, but what are they going to do once that happens, the fallout, where are they going to go then? And that's occupying, that's siphoning out the fuel. So here's the deal. Let's call this a negative emotion, because it's sucking our energy. So what do we do about it? I'm glad you asked. The negative emotions, again, the core perspective of this series is that as long as when we know who we are inside, and this duality that I just explained about the self-driven soul versus the purpose-driven soul, once we know that, we can tackle any of these emotions. And the same thing is true with the imposter syndrome. Sometimes I'll give you another example. Maybe a relationship example of imposter syndrome. You do something really nice for someone else, and then afterwards you feel like, that wasn't me. I don't usually do that. Who was I pretending to be? Or you do a mitzvah, you do something very Jewy that you don't usually do, right? You do something like super Jewy, and then you're like, oy vey, what did I just do? I'm not that person. I don't do that. Or somebody says, hey, why don't you come to this Jewy thing? And you're like, I don't roll in those circles. That's not who I am. I don't want to be inauthentic. I don't want to be a hypocrite. Guess what? We have two souls. We have two operating systems. There's nothing that's true and meaningful. There's nothing that's amazing, that's inauthentic to our higher self. Maybe to our lower self it feels inauthentic. It may feel not so genuine. It may feel hypocritical. But there's nothing of value in relationships when it comes to our spiritual progress. There's nothing of value that we could ever do or hope to do that is inauthentic or inconsistent with that second soul that we possess that is literally a piece of God. And so as we think to ourselves, well, maybe I'm an imposter. Let's put the business example on hold for a moment. Maybe I'm not genuine in this good behavior that I'm thinking about doing or volunteering or being in a relationship in this type of way or spiritual connection. Maybe I'm being inauthentic. The next thought is, well, wait a second. Now that we know this, it's not inauthentic at all. It's absolutely authentic because we're both. It's authentic. It is authentic to be selfish and to say, no, I don't want to. I don't want to help out or whatever it is. But it's also very much authentic to step up and say, to raise your hand and say, I'll be there for you. I'll be there for you, and it's not about me. It's about you. It's about something higher than myself. It's about purpose. Maybe it's about God. Whatever that higher thing is for us, it's absolutely authentic. And I would say, bring it back to the business example. Person feels like they're not qualified. What's going to happen when people find out that I'm not qualified? Like, who am I to be teaching this class? Again, theoretically, if somebody's like concerned about that, who are you not qualified? I don't know how to finish that sentence. Whatever. However that needs to play out in grammar, right? Who are we to think that we're not capable? If we have this higher divine soul, remember, it's a piece of God. Is God limited to certain abilities? I'm not saying that you and I are like God and we can create things, but we're creating the image of God, which means if we don't know it now, we can learn it. So we don't need to feel overwhelmed. We don't need to feel a discomfort because, we're a fraud, we're inauthentic, we're hypocritical, we're going to be found out. Not being found out. We can learn and we can develop if we have that confidence. If we're worried about what's going to happen when people realize that we don't know the answers yet, then we're drained. But if we're confident in our abilities and we're positive because we know our potential and the sky's the limit because we have this second soul that's our primary soul, but it's called second because sometimes it feels second, but it's really number one. It's really number one, right? When we know that, when we know this core tenet, this core teaching of Tanya, imposter syndrome, we can push it away. Final point. Look, we only spent a little time on imposter syndrome because we don't have a lot of time today. The next sessions, we're going to spend a lot of time on the negative. Today was more about kind of like the framework that we can then operate with, and one example. The next 5 sessions is going to be a deep dive into, like next week is shame. And it's a heavy topic. And we're going to get really deep into that. And really discover some incredible tools. Here's the point. In all of these lessons and all the takeaways, is the thought that once we learn these ideas, we're never going to feel a negative emotion again? Of course not. Of course not. Of course we will. Of course we're going to feel at some point negative and then drained and whatever. The point of this course is to gain tools to combat that. So we're not going to become tzaddikim, perfect people that say, who am I? I'm a divine soul, and I only think about purpose, and I never think about ego. It's not about me, it's about everyone else, and I have the greatest potential in the world, and therefore I'm never upset, and I'm never this, I never feel inadequate, I never feel unauthentic, I'm never a hypocrite. We're going to feel like that at some point in time. The point here is to have ammunition, to have the tools to catch ourselves and say, wait a second. I know where this is coming from. It's coming from that lower ego, which is scared. Ego is always scared of losing what it has, right? It's coming from the ego place that's scared of getting caught as being, not qualified or whatever it is. And I know that there's another part of me. And if I assert that part of me, which begins with awareness, then I can be different in this moment. So, what's today's takeaway? Number one, positive and negative emotions, how we feel inside. It's not just about our mood, it's about our life. So it's very important. It's important that we care for ourselves inside, number one. Number two, there are how we feel is a choice. And when I say it's a choice, I don't mean it's as easy as, a switch that we can flip, but it's a choice that we make whether or not we're going to work on it or just let it be in a reactive way. Whatever comes our way, we'll feel whatever we feel. It's a choice that we make to intentionally work on feeling a certain way. So number one, it's critically important. Number two, it's within our control to a large extent. Number three, getting into the actual content. Human beings are standing on a fault line, or we have this line, this duality inside. And on one side of the divide is ego, the other side is purpose or meaning or mission or something greater than ourselves. We can, at any moment, we choose who we are. Am I somebody who's all about me, or am I about the other, or about something greater than myself? And knowing this and getting in touch with this can help us combat imposter syndrome. Thank you very much for joining me today for Lesson 1. I look forward to seeing all of you back next week, same bat time, same bat channel, or Tuesday night at 8, whatever you prefer, for session number 2. Thank you.